Our next speaker is Grace Lewis. She's an assistant professor in the Department of Animal and Dairy Science at UW River Falls and a Dairy Innovation Hub funded faculty member. Today she's going to talk about lactose-free ice cream.
All right. Thank you so much for the introduction. So, gotta say, with the introduction I received from the chancellor and everybody else, this might be the most pressure I've ever felt to give a presentation. It was a lot, but I am very grateful for the Dairy Innovation Hub and to be here. I really appreciate all of their support for a young faculty member like me. And I say young, but I'm officially at the age where driving at night is terrifying, okay? So getting up there, you know. But my presentation is going to be on lactose-free ice cream. So going to give a brief introduction on what lactose intolerance is. We've all heard of it, talking a little bit about the prevalence and what it is, and then dive into some of the results from our research project. We've gone more in depth than the results I'm going to present today, but just covering some basics. So first, lactose intolerance. First, I'm sure most of you know, lactose in milk, it's a major carbohydrate in milk, it's milk sugar. And within milk, fluid milk, it's at about 5%. And that's going to vary based on species, but it is the most abundant solid in milk on average at 5%. And it's a disaccharide of glucose and galactose. So that's a scientific term. It means glucose and galactose bound together to form lactose. Lactose in other dairy products. So I do like to educate folks on the fact that some products, such as cheddar cheese and aged cheeses, tend to be naturally low in lactose at less than 0.1%. But there are some dairy products, like the one I'll talk about today in ice cream, that's about 6%. You add additional solids in, including lactose, so it's actually higher than the concentration in milk. So what is lactose intolerance? For a lot of people who digest lactose normally, they have the lactose sugar, again, glucose and galactose, and they can break it down in their gastrointestinal tract by an enzyme called lactase. However, some people lack this enzyme to break down lactose into its component parts. So, lactose reaches the colon, where it's fermented by a variety of gut microbiota, producing gas and other uncomfortable side effects. And you might be surprised to know that this lactose intolerance, about 65% of the world's population is lactose intolerant, right? That's a huge percentage. That's more than half, right? And it's most common in people from African or Asian origin, okay? So if we talk about exporting dairy products, that's tough when you're exporting to a lactose intolerant, primarily population. In some regions, you're looking at roughly 100% of their population is lactose intolerant. But the dairy industry, we have a solution. So again, some dairy products are naturally low in lactose, like aged cheese, but we also can use either filtration or enzymes to break down or remove this lactose. So filtration, you can remove some of it through a filter, but primarily, lactose can be broken down by lactase, that same enzyme, in the dairy products prior to consumption. So it breaks down this disaccharide, these two sugars bound together, it breaks down lactose into glucose and galactose prior to consumption. And that's where you see those many lactose-free dairy products on the market. And this is a large market space, and it's a growing market space. So currently, it's a $6.8 billion global market. But there seems to be a lack of literature surrounding this topic. So we know these products exist, but smaller manufacturers, how would they know how to get into this space? It's a growing market. There are many opportunities here. But the science is really interesting. It seems simple, right? You have lactose, you break it down, but that's going to alter freezing properties of ice cream. When you break down lactose, glucose and galactose are sweeter than lactose is initially, so it changes the properties of the final product. And there seems to be maybe a lack of resources out there for people to get into this space. So our research project, it's a very collaborative research project between UW-Madison and myself, where we have 3 objectives. The first is to evaluate the kinetics of lactase, this enzyme that breaks down lactose. Where does it work most favorably? So what temperature? Does sucrose, table sugar, inhibit the functionality of lactase, this enzyme? And then to actually go and produce lactose-free ice cream, like the one you'll be trying later today, in both the Babcock dairy as well as the dairy plant at River Falls. Beautiful dairy plant. They're packaging ice cream for the first time in a long time today, so very, very good news. And then finally, to evaluate the economic feasibility of this product. So it's going to cost more initially to make lactose-free ice cream, but is it a value-added product? Are consumers willing to pay more for it? And that's what we're trying to determine, because that really hasn't been studied before. So first, showing you some simplified results. We are looking at lactase kinetics, again, the kinetics of this enzyme at different temperatures using a Milko-scan. So here you're looking at a graph. On the x-axis, you just have time. On the y-axis, you have the percent of lactose. And this is an ice cream mix, 13% fat, that we added this enzyme into. All right, so it's breaking down the lactose. And you can see the different temperatures here. The red colors, I thought that made sense, red is hot, are 45 degrees Celsius, so ice cream mix held at 45 degrees Celsius with this enzyme working, compared to ice cream mix stored at refrigerated temperatures, so 5 degrees Celsius, shown in blue. And then we also looked again at the concentration of sucrose, or table sugar, in the ice cream. 0%, 12%, we studied more concentrations than that, but I'm just showing you some basic results. And you can see that, yes, at 45 degrees Celsius, at these hotter conditions, this enzyme works more favorably, right, faster. It breaks down lactose faster. And of course, when you're breaking down lactose, you're forming glucose, right? Glucose and galactose bound together, you're breaking it down, you're forming more glucose. So you see the same trends, it makes sense, breaking down lactose, you're forming glucose. But I bring this up because verifying that a product is low lactose or lactose-free is expensive. You have to send your product to an external company where they test lactose, and lactose is really hard to measure. So it costs a lot of money to verify these products. For a small manufacturer, we looked at, can you use a blood glucose meter, what diabetics use, to evaluate the concentration of glucose in ice cream mix. So again, you're breaking down lactose and glucose and galactose. Can you measure it using a blood glucose meter? And generally, yes, you can see the trends. So again, on the y-axis, you have time. On the x-axis, on the x-axis, you have time. On the y-axis, you have the concentration of glucose, because remember, you're forming glucose. And you can see the different temperatures, again, from blue, cold, to hotter. You can see up to 45 degrees Celsius, we have a positive trend. The enzyme is working faster until we get to 55 degrees Celsius, where now the enzyme is actually inhibited. But using a blood glucose meter, which is pretty cool. And students love to see this. I mean, you take a small drop of ice cream mix and you put it on a blood glucose meter, and it gives you a number that actually makes sense. It's pretty cool. Okay, so that was objective 1, still working through this. But objective 2 was looking at lactose-free ice cream and actually manufacturing it and looking at some of the properties. Because again, it's a scientific issue. You're taking lactose, you're breaking it down, and that impacts the freezing point, it impacts the sweetness, it impacts more than you would expect. It seems simple, but it's more complicated than that. So we took a variety of commercial samples, as well as a sample that we produced at the Babcock Dairy, and we monitored, in this case, the melting rate. So you're looking, again, time on the x-axis. On the y-axis, you're looking at percent melted. And we saw that regular, non-lactose-free ice cream did melt faster than lactose-free ice cream. Okay? And these are commercial samples, except for the ones with the squares. We made those. But they tend to separate out. And we, again, if you're an industry or a dairy processor and you're producing this lactose-free ice cream, you can reformulate to make these ice creams behave the same. But that knowledge isn't necessarily out there. So trying to promote and see these differences and how can we kind of educate around that. And finally, what we're going to get started very soon, Chuck told me in January, we're going to run some surveys and some bidding experiments that I'll talk a little bit about. But if you have economics questions, Chuck's your guy, all right? So again, I've mentioned how this lactose-free ice cream is made. You have to have this enzyme. It costs time for this enzyme to break down lactose. You also need extra storage tanks for this enzyme to work. And you need to verify that samples are lactose-free. It's a more expensive product to make overall. However, there are many opportunities. First, 65% of the world's population is lactose intolerant. More opportunities, more customers there. You can also reduce added sugar because, again, you're breaking down lactose and glucose and galactose, and those two things separated from lactose are sweeter. So you can reduce added sugar, as well as you can optimize this process. At warmer temperatures, as we just saw, this enzyme works more favorably, so you can reduce the amount of time to produce this ice cream mix. And is it added value? And that's really what we're trying to answer. Is it added value? Will consumers spend more on a lactose-free product? And so how we're running this, and this font's probably a little small, but we're giving consumers or people participating in these surveys the option of 3 different ice creams. Some are going to be lactose-free, some are going to be low lactose, some are going to be normal. We're also going to look at reducing sugar, and we're going to see where consumers are willing to spend more. Are they willing to spend more for lactose-free products, or is it just certain consumers who are willing to spend more? And then on top of that, they actually get to take home, depending on what product they bid on, they get to take home a half-gallon of ice cream. So it's very realistic. They're literally taking home a product. So again, Chuck's your guy over there. It's been awesome to work with him. So our next steps, we're going to produce this ice cream at River Falls and evaluate, again, the melting rate, as well as maybe look at some sales data, conduct these consumer surveys, and evaluate the economics. Chuck. And then we're going to disseminate this data, because we're doing this for the dairy industry, right? We're hoping that even smaller manufacturers can get a hold of this data and know where to start with lactose-free ice cream production, because it's an awesome and growing market. With that, I'd like to thank the Dairy Innovation Hub, as well as UW Consortium for Extension and Research in Ag and Natural Resources, who funded this work, and then my collaborators and my wonderful group of students. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Grace.